Good morning. There are two news which got me worried today. One is way back in Europe, Air France has ordered that its crew would start wearing headscarves, the ladies especially. When they enter Iran, they would be wearing headscarf and a jacket, loose jacket over their clothes to give a semblance of being covered in a way. You can call it chadar, you can call it hijab, you can call it burqa, whatever you want to call it, but the purpose is to hide the hair and to hide the contours of the body. The second news is nearer home in Montreal yesterday. As a matter of fact, in Quebec, a Sikh young man was beaten by some hoodlums who kicked him because he was wearing a turban. Possibly, they mistook him as a Muslim, but whether as a Muslim or a Sikh, the wanton beaten is not acceptable, nor is the imposition of hijab or burqa. But the government of France on its own citizens when they are flying towards Iran. I still remember there was a lot of outcry, and even the Supreme Court of Canada intervened to say that nobody can force the Muslims to remove hijab. If they cannot be forced to remove the hijab, why should they be forced to wear the clothes which are not acceptable to them? Now, as a matter of fact, this shows rising intolerance. Intolerance for the views of the others and intolerance for not accepting others. In one case, it's a subservience to the fundamentalism, and in the other case, the reaction towards that. Now, there is a sort of empathy in these two incidents. On the one side, Air France is trying to be extra careful not to injure the sensibilities of Iran. On the other hand, people are resenting the intrusion of clothing which they cannot understand or cannot relate to. In Quebec, as a matter of fact, after this incident, there was a graffiti, there was a plethora, there was a rage of graffiti, and the graffiti was, in fact, painting swastika on walls, on buses, on vehicles, everywhere. Now, people have been talking about rising Nazism, neo-Nazism as a term. But is it really so? Is it not, in fact, a reaction against the intrusion of the others, as well as a desire to maintain the purity of your life? Now, swastika, they say, is a sign of Hitler's Nazism, but they also forget that it's also a sign of the Hindus. Hindus believe swastika to be a sign of good omen. There is a slight difference, and with some alteration, swastika can appear to be a pure Hindu sign. As a matter of fact, it's a variation of the same sign, because the Aryans, when they came, one branch left to Europe, the other came to India, so basics are the same. Anyway, coming back to intolerance, why is it that we cannot accept others with whom we cannot relate outside by the physical appearance, where there's a clothing, where there's a face, where there's a cut of the other akuma, the physical akuma. But then I can understand that in case you don't agree with the person intellectually, if you don't relate to the person's thoughts, then even then the violence is not acceptable. If you don't agree with that person, say goodbye. You can always agree to disagree, and disagree in a pleasant manner. But to start beating a person is bad, and same way showing too much of political correctness so that the sensibilities of others are not hurt is equally bad. Sometimes I'm really amazed to what extent can our politically correctness go. I have seen the premier and the other members of the legislature, even the former Prime Minister's wife, Laurie, they were wearing saris and the Punjabi suits, simply to relate to the immigrants and ensure, well, look here, we accept you, or the way our present Prime Minister goes to Gurdwara or to a mosque and offers prayers. Well, offering prayers is not bad, but showing it is definitely not acceptable. That's a sign of hypocrisy. On the one side, beating is not acceptable. On the other side, subservience to the others is not acceptable. Both are equally detestable because one shows that you cannot be a human being, you cannot accept another human being. The other shows that you are so degenerate that either you do not like to be yourself or you are a hypocrite. You are not a normal human being. And then secondly, coming to the intellectual aspect or to the empirical aspect, neo-Nazism is always a result of fear. There is always the fear of unknown. We always say that fear is the black godmother of all damnable things. Another person comes dressed in a different way, looking the different way, and you are afraid, well, he might be a snake in the grass. And you start being offensive because you believe that offense is the best defense. But that's not really so. So this fear is the idea that gives birth to violence, which is though unacceptable, but we have got to understand it. The responsibility is of the victim as well. I do not exaggerate the guilty people, they must be punished. But society as a whole has to ensure and explain the relevance and the importance of being different. We always claim diversity of our strength. Diversity is our strength, provided we can find unity in that diversity. In case the political correctness keeps on increasing the divisions in diversity, the differences in diversity, that's not our strength. But in case we are understandably human, then diversity can be a strength. Otherwise, diversity would be divisive, would be fractious, and would result in violence, wanton violence, undesirable violence. At the same time, when the political leadership shows too much of political correctness, the people as a whole do not like it, and they believe that they are being taken for a ride. They believe that the political leadership is trying to kowtow to these new people, the different people, with an ulterior purpose. And no, they cannot react to the political leadership. So what they do is they react to the people who they think are responsible for making changes in the attitudes of the leaders. So it's a vicarious beating of the political leadership rather than of the real victim. Of course, the innocent person suffers. Of course, the people who are least involved suffer. But the society as a whole is responsible, and the primary responsibility lies with the political leadership, who, instead of explaining the unifying factors, try to placate and pander to the immigrants, to the different people, not to establish identity, but to exploit them. And in return, these sense of exploitation irritates, inflames the people at home who thinks that they are being discriminated against. And the result is neo-Nazism. So this is a domino effect, but ultimately it's the innocent who suffer. The way out is explain people. I remember I wrote a series of 26 articles for the Mississauga News about 8 years back, and in which I said, know thy neighbor. That helped people to understand the foibles and the strengths of their neighboring communities. Government doesn't do that. Political leaderships don't do that. And the societies, the organizations that are supposed to represent the communities, they don't do that. I have seen the immigrants coming, celebrating their own festivals, their own cultural events, without trying to explain to the original Canadians how these incidents relate to their own culture as well. Recently, Indians celebrated Holi. Well, the color festival of colors. Had they been able to tell them, look here, our celebration of Holi is like the Italian tomatita, then they would have understood it, or they could have told them it's like Rio Carnival. Well, they understand that Rio Carnival and they could relate to that, and they are exactly the same. I wrote some time back that 18 festivals of identical nature celebrated all over the globe in the month of February. Now, if that thing is explicated to the people, people will accept it. But otherwise they say, wow, what are they doing? The need is to address the point of intolerance. Neo-Nazism has to be understood as a sort of a reaction to the pandering of the different people, different communities. No, it's a natural reaction. If I find a snarling dog, I like to beat it. But if I know the dog is not snarling, but it is like, as a matter of fact, wants to be sympathetic, wants to come to me as a friend, I will not do that. So, while we cannot accept neo-Nazism, we have to understand the human frailty. And it's incumbent on the political leadership not to indulge in cheap tactics which divide the people further and further. Thank you.